Hello and good evening. You're watching AWANI Tonight with me, Hafiz Marzukhi. Malaysia is prepared to accept 15 Palestinians released from Israeli prisons and resettle them here. Foreign Minister Datuk Seri Muhammad Hassan says the move is part of the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, which took effect on January 19th.
Muhammad stated that as part of the ceasefire and hostage exchange deal, some Palestinians released from Israeli jails will be barred from returning to Gaza. Muhammad assured that accepting 15 of them would not be a burden, given that countries like Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt have taken in millions of Palestinian refugees. He added that Turkey and Egypt will take in most of these prisoners, with other members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, including Qatar, Pakistan, and Indonesia, also participating.
Stricter regulations are now being enforced on heavy vehicles on highways. The Transport Ministry is cracking down on commercial vehicle violations, enforcing stricter lane restrictions, speed limits, and real-time monitoring.
Lorries and buses will no longer be allowed in the rightmost lane. Ministry Secretary General Datuk Jana Santiran Munyayan said the regulation was gazetted in 2015 but never enforced. The ministry is also mandating the installation of speed limiters on heavy vehicles, capping speeds at 80 to 90 kilometers per hour. GPS tracking is now mandatory that will allow real-time monitoring. Other than that, in order to tackle overloaded vehicles, high-speed weigh-in motion sensors are being installed at 11 highway locations. The system will work alongside toll plaza sensors to automatically issue summonses for weight violations. Last year alone, 45,216 summonses were issued for overloading violations.
Malaysia is set to receive 2 new electric train service or ETS sets from China next month, with 8 more to be assembled locally. Transport Minister Anthony Loke says the new trains will be operational in stages by the end of the year.
ETS services will extend to Segamat as the station is ready, but Johor Bahru services remain on hold pending station completion. The existing trains will service Segamat for now, while the new sets are being prepared. Anthony said that with the new trains put in service, the frequency of ETS service from Johor Bahru to Kuala Lumpur would also increase, and this would benefit the passengers. Meanwhile, the upgraded Seremban Central Station featuring modern facilities is expected to be completed within 2 years, with piling works now underway. The station is also set to be integrated with commercial developments.
With the government in the midst of gathering input on the formulation of the political financing bill, we take a look at the key issues and challenges surrounding this legislation. We speak to University of Nottingham, Malaysia's Associate Professor of Practice, Dr. Tricia Yeo, about what could possibly hinder the bill's passage.
The idea behind a political financing bill is to ensure that there is transparency, because transparency is what will allow there to be some light shed on where the movements of monies are going into the political parties. What goes out of political parties, that would not necessarily be covered under the political financing bill, because we're talking about the financing of political parties per se, how the money flows into the parties. Now, the transparency threshold, that can be debated, right? So we can, for example, determine with policymakers and parties on what levels they're comfortable with. If we are looking at a higher threshold, that means that only donors above a certain amount will be named transparently in a sort of report. And if we look at a lower threshold, it means that, again, the lower the bar is, even if you contribute a small amount of money, then your name as a donor will come out in this report. Now, who gets this report? So this comes to the second question about which is the body, the regulatory body that will be running and overseeing the entire process. Ideally, and what is being proposed by the APPG, or the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Political Financing, is that it's an independent body that is separate from Parliament, separate from the executive, but of course ensuring that members are selected based on their capabilities, based on their professional affiliations, And then this body would have to be very, very discreet, right? Because they might be receiving reports from the political party, and then they will decide what will then be tabled to Parliament. So you would expect that what's tabled to Parliament, it therefore becomes a public document. Now, the third point would be discussions over whether there is going to be public funding. Public funding meaning the state or the government itself issues some proportion of funds to each political party based on the percentage of what each party occupies in Parliament. Public funding is not new. It's a practice that many countries, many jurisdictions around the world already have. And public funding allows the political system to stabilize, and you have a reduced sort of Malaysia has experience with a lot of this party hopping or coalition hopping. So to stabilize the political system, providing public funding allows the parties to have some minimum amount of funding to begin with, so that the parties don't have to depend on other sources, for example, corporate funding or individual donor funding, which you can imagine is going to be possibly compromising of the party's values, ideals, and also actions, especially if the party is in a position of power where it can determine who can receive licenses and contracts and tenders and so on. So that's the third issue, public funding.
Now, Tricia acknowledges the strong resistance to political reform, but emphasizes that legislative measures are crucial in preventing future scandals like 1MDB.
In the recent years, we have seen examples of 1MDB as a huge international issue that negatively reported on Malaysia in so many multiple ways. The story that we want to tell the public and the policymakers and politicians as well is that if we don't want a repeat of an incident as bad as 1MDB that gave such negative international reputation to Malaysia, which also impacted on our economy, impacted on the ability of investors to see Malaysia as a stable place within which to operate, then we also need to be able to show that these laws are being enacted to ensure that our institutions are robust enough to catch whenever there is a potential 1MDB taking place again. We know that political parties need funds to operate, which is why we want that a system, a regulatory system is put in place to allow for that and create the parameters around which the parties can still function, can still flourish, and can still operate, because we want the parties to still contribute to our parliamentary democracy. The legislation, we hope, will do that.
We'll go for a short break. Stay with us.
Kerap menggaruk kulit kepala disebabkan kelumur, masalahnya lebih mendalam. Gunalah Head and Shoulders menembusi 5 lapisan untuk membasmi kelumur dan kegatalan. Bebas kelumur sehingga 100%. Head and Shoulders diuji secara dermatologi. Dimasak seikhlas rasa. Air tangan insan istimewa. Masak bersama, Ramadan bermakna. Dapatkan resepi inspirasi di Maggi.my. Rambut gugur lagi? Macam mana Gunakan Pantene Baharu dengan provitamin mikro yang meresap dan menguatkan rambut dari dalam. Rambut 10 kali lebih kuat terhadap rambut gugur. Pantene Baharu.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Mourners gathered to bid farewell to Palestinian victims killed in Israeli strikes on Gaza City, as bodies were laid out on the ground at Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital. The aftermath of the Israeli strikes on Gaza has left widespread destruction, with buildings damaged and debris scattered across the area. Israeli airstrikes pounded Gaza on early Tuesday, killing at least 200 people, Palestinian health authorities said, and threatening a complete collapse of a 2-month ceasefire as Israel vowed to use force to free its remaining hostages in the Strip. Strikes were reported in multiple locations. Palestinian Health Ministry officials said many of the dead were children. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he had instructed the military to take strong action against Hamas in Gaza in response to the group's refusal to release hostages and rejection of ceasefire proposals. Hamas meanwhile accused Israel of overturning the hard-fought ceasefire deal, leaving the fate of 59 hostages still held in Gaza uncertain. Authorities clamped indefinite curfew on parts of the Indian city of Nagpur after more than a dozen police officers were hurt in clashes. The violence was sparked by a Hindu group's demand for the removal of the tomb of a 17th century Mughal ruler. Monday's clashes in the central Indian city damaged many vehicles and injured several people, among them at least 15 police personnel, one of whom was in serious condition, a police officer said, speaking on condition of anonymity. Police said in a statement that members of the Hindu group, the Vishva Hindu Parishad or VHP, burnt an effigy of Mughal Empire Aurangzeb and his tomb as they chanted slogans demanding its removal from the nearby city of Aurangabad. The police said the situation escalated after several members of Muslim groups marched near a police station and threw stones at them. Nagpur is the headquarters of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh or RSS, the ideological parent of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party. The VHP belongs to the same family of organizations. Modi's critics have often accused him of discriminating against Muslims and failing to act against those targeting them. He and his government have denied the accusations. Several dozen activists held a protest and vigil at The Hague, calling for former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte to be held accountable as he faces trial at the International Criminal Court or ICC for his war on drugs campaign that killed thousands of people. On Friday, Duterte made his first appearance via video link before the ICC for an initial appearance. He is set to appear for the confirmation of charges hearing on September 23rd. Duterte, who led the Philippines from 2016 to 2022, is said to be the first Asian former head of state to go on trial at the ICC, a court of last resort created more than 2 decades ago to prosecute individuals for war crimes, crimes against humanity, aggression and genocide. Thousands of purported drug dealers and users were killed during a crackdown when death squads he allegedly created and armed carried out widespread extrajudicial killings. That wraps up AWANI tonight. Check out our web portal, keeping you informed on the critical events shaping our world, all in one place at international.astroawani.com. That's all for now. I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Thanks for watching and good night.
Schedule